The cafe was nearly empty that rainy Thursday evening when Sarah wiped down the last table near the window. Her white apron was stained from a long shift at Rosie's diner, and her feet ached from standing all day. She checked her phone one more time and sighed deeply. Her blind date was 30 minutes late, and she felt foolish for even showing up. Her best friend Kaisha had set this up 3 weeks ago, but Sarah had almost canceled twice. At 30 years old, she had given up on fairy tales, and romance felt like something that happened to other people. Just as she grabbed her coat from the back of her chair, she heard the door chime, and 2 small voices rang through the quiet space. 2 identical little boys with the brightest smiles she had ever seen rushed toward her table, and the taller one by maybe an inch said in the most polite voice she ever heard from a 5-year-old that his daddy was very sorry for being late because there was traffic on the highway. Sarah stood frozen as her heart did something strange in her chest. These beautiful black twin boys with their neat cornrows and matching blue sweaters looked up at her with hopeful brown eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. Before she could speak, a tall man walked through the door, and her breath caught in her throat. He was the most handsome man she had ever seen in real life, with strong shoulders and kind eyes that seemed tired but gentle. His name was Daniel Webb, and he was supposed to be her blind date, but Kaisha had forgotten to mention one tiny detail about the twins. Daniel walked toward the table with an apologetic smile that made Sarah's stomach flip in a way she had not felt in years. He introduced himself and his sons Jaden and Jordan, and explained that his babysitter had canceled at the last minute. Sarah could see the embarrassment in his face, and something else too that looked like loneliness. She smiled at the boys and told them it was perfectly fine, and asked if they were hungry. The twins nodded so fast their heads looked like bobbleheads, and Sarah laughed for the first time that evening. She called over to the kitchen and asked her manager Rosa if she could get a table for 4 and some chicken tenders for the boys. Rosa, who had known Sarah for 5 years and knew about the blind date, gave her a knowing wink and said to take her time. As they sat down, Jaden, the twin with a small scar above his left eyebrow, asked Sarah if she liked superheroes because he and Jordan loved Spider-Man more than anything in the whole world. Sarah told them that she actually preferred Wonder Woman because she thought girls could be heroes too. Jordan clapped his hands and said that was so cool, and that maybe Wonder Woman and Spider-Man could be friends. Daniel watched this exchange with something that looked like wonder in his eyes, and Sarah noticed how he looked at his sons with such pure love that it made her chest hurt. The dinner went better than Sarah could have ever imagined possible for a first date with 2 5-year-old chaperones. Daniel told her that he owned a tech company in Los Angeles called Webb Innovations, and that they created software for hospitals to help doctors save more lives. He did not mention that he was a billionaire or that his company was worth more than most small countries. Sarah talked about her life as a waitress and how she was saving money to go back to school to become a teacher because she loved children. The twins hung on her every word like she was telling them the greatest story ever written. Halfway through dinner, Jordan looked at Sarah with his big brown eyes and asked her the question that would change everything. He asked in his sweet little voice if she could be their mommy because they never had one, and all the other kids at school had mommies. The restaurant seemed to stop spinning, and Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes before she could stop them. Daniel looked horrified and started to apologize, but Sarah held up her hand gently. She reached across the table and took both boys' small hands in hers and told them that being a mommy was the most special job in the world, and that their real mommy was watching them from heaven and was so proud of them. Jaden asked if that meant she could not be their mommy, and Sarah felt her heart break into a million pieces. She told them that being a mommy takes time and that people have to become friends first, but that she would love to be their friend. The boys seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to their chicken tenders, but Daniel looked at Sarah like she had just given him the greatest gift anyone had ever given him. After dinner, Daniel insisted on walking Sarah to her car, even though it was raining harder now, and the twins splashed in every puddle they could find. When they reached her old Honda Civic that had seen better days, Daniel thanked her for being so kind to his sons. Sarah could see something in his face that looked like pain mixed with hope. He told her something that made her understand everything. He said that his wife Alicia had died giving birth to the twins 5 years ago, and that he had raised them, alone with help from his mother. He said he had built his entire company, working 18-hour days to give his boys the best life possible, but that he knew they needed more than just money and toys. He said he had not been on a date since Alicia died, because he could not imagine letting anyone else into their lives, but that Kaisha had convinced him to try. Daniel said he understood if Sarah never wanted to see him again, because dating a single father of twins was not what most women signed up for. Sarah looked at this strong man who was showing her his broken pieces and felt something shift inside her soul. She told him that she would love to see him and the boys again, and maybe they could go to the park next weekend. The smile that spread across Daniel's face was like watching the sun come up after the longest night. The twins overheard this and started jumping up and down in the rain, puddles screaming that Miss Sarah was going to be their friend forever. The next few months became the happiest time of Sarah's life, and she felt like she was living in a dream she did not want to wake up from. Every weekend she spent time with Daniel and the twins doing simple things like going to the park or the movies or just making pancakes in Daniel's huge kitchen that was bigger than her entire apartment. The boys had attached themselves to her heart like superglue, and she found herself thinking about them constantly during her shifts at the diner. Daniel was different from any man she had ever known, because he was not trying to impress her with money or gifts. He impressed her by being a devoted father who read bedtime stories with funny voices and never missed a single school event. Sarah learned that Daniel had grown up poor in South Central Los Angeles with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He had taught himself to code at the library when he was 12 and had built his first app when he was 16. By the time he was 25, he had sold his first company for $10 million and used that money to start Web Innovations. He told Sarah that success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with, and that money could not buy back the time he lost with Alicia. Sarah shared her own story about growing up in a trailer park in Arizona, with parents who loved her but struggled with addiction. She told him about how she had worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college before running out of money. She told him about the shame she sometimes felt being 30 and still a waitress when everyone else from high school seemed to have their lives together. Daniel took her face in his hands and told her that she was the strongest person he had ever met and that her story was not over yet. Everything changed on a warm Saturday morning in May when Sarah arrived at Daniel's house to take the boys to the zoo. She knocked on the door and Jaden answered, but his face was not wearing his usual smile. He told her quietly that Jordan was sick and that Daddy was very worried. Sarah rushed inside to find Jordan lying on the couch with Daniel sitting beside him, looking more scared than she had ever seen him. Jordan had a high fever and was barely responding when they said his name. Daniel said he had called the doctor, but Sarah could see the panic in his eyes. She told Daniel they needed to take Jordan to the emergency room right now, and she would drive so Daniel could sit in the back with both boys. At the hospital, the doctors ran tests for what felt like forever, while Sarah held Jaden in the waiting room and Daniel paced back and forth like a caged animal. Finally, a doctor came out and said that Jordan had a serious infection that had spread quickly, but that they had caught it in time. The doctor said that if they had waited even a few more hours, it could have been much worse. Daniel collapsed into a chair and put his face in his hands. Sarah had never seen a man cry like that before, with his whole body shaking. She sat beside him and pulled him close and let him break apart because she knew he had been holding everything together for so long. Jaden climbed into Sarah's lap and whispered that he was scared. Sarah kissed the top of his head and promised him that his brother was going to be okay, and that they were all going to be okay. Jordan had to stay in the hospital for 5 days, and Sarah never left their side except to go home and change clothes. She called in sick to work, and Rosa told her not to worry about it, because family came first. That word family echoed in Sarah's head, because that was exactly what they had become without her even realizing it. She was not just Daniel's girlfriend anymore, and she was not just the boys' friend. She was part of their family, and they were part of hers. On the 3rd night in the hospital, after the boys had fallen asleep, Daniel took Sarah's hand and led her to the quiet hallway. He looked exhausted with dark circles under his eyes and stubble on his face, but his eyes were clear. He told Sarah that watching her with his sons over the past few days had shown him something he already knew in his heart. He said that he had fallen in love with her and that his boys had too. He said he knew it was fast and crazy, but that life was too short to pretend feelings did not exist. He said that when he almost lost Jordan, he realized that the family he had been trying to protect by keeping walls up was already right in front of him. Daniel asked Sarah if she felt the same way, and she felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded. She told him that she loved him, and she loved Jaden and Jordan with her whole heart. She told him that she had never felt like she belonged anywhere until she met them. They stood in that hospital hallway and kissed for the first time while the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and it was the most perfect moment of Sarah's entire life. When Jordan was released from the hospital, Daniel insisted that Sarah move into the guest room at his house so she could be close to the boys during their recovery. Sarah agreed, but only temporarily because she did not want to rush things. But temporary turned into permanent when she realized she could not imagine sleeping anywhere else but under the same roof as her new family. The boys were overjoyed, and Jaden asked her every single day if this meant she was their mommy now. Sarah told them that she loved them like a mommy, but that it was important they never forgot their birth mother, Alicia. She hung pictures of Alicia around the house and told the boys stories about how much their mommy had loved them, even though she never got to hold them. Daniel watched her do this with tears in his eyes because he had been so afraid that moving on meant forgetting. Sarah helped him understand that love was not a limited resource and that honoring Alicia's memory was part of loving his sons. She researched grief counseling for children and found a wonderful therapist who helped Jaden and Jordan understand their feelings about having a new mother figure in their lives. The therapist told Daniel and Sarah that they were doing everything right and that the boys were thriving because they felt safe to express their emotions. 6 months after Sarah moved in, Daniel took her and the boys on a trip to Hawaii for Thanksgiving. Sarah had never been on a plane before and had definitely never stayed in a resort, where the rooms cost more per night than she used to make in a month. Daniel loved watching her experience everything with wide eyes and genuine joy. On their 2nd night there, after the boys were asleep, Daniel asked Sarah to take a walk on the beach with him. The moon was full and bright, and the waves crashed against the shore in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face Sarah, and she could see he was nervous. He took both her hands in his and started talking in a voice that shook with emotion. He told her that before he met her, he had been going through the motions of life, but not really living. He said that she had brought light back into his world and had given his sons something he could never give them alone. He said that she had shown him that it was possible to honor the past while building a future. Then Daniel got down on one knee in the sand and pulled out a ring that sparkled in the moonlight. He asked Sarah if she would marry him and become the boy's mother in every way that mattered. Sarah could not speak because her throat was closed with emotion, but she nodded so hard she thought her head might fall off. She said yes over and over again while Daniel slipped the ring on her finger and stood up to kiss her. They heard squealing from the resort balcony and looked up to see Jaden and Jordan jumping up and down in their pajamas. Daniel laughed and yelled up, asking what they were doing awake. Jordan shouted back that they could not sleep because they were too excited about Miss Sarah becoming their real mommy. Sarah laughed and cried at the same time and knew that this moment would be burned into her memory forever. The wedding was planned for the following summer, and Sarah insisted it be a small ceremony with just close family and friends. Daniel's mother, Gloria, flew in from Los Angeles and embraced Sarah like she was her own daughter. Gloria told Sarah that she had prayed every single day for God to send someone special into her son's life, and that her prayers had been answered. Sarah's parents drove in from Arizona, and even though they were not perfect, they were sober and proud of their daughter. Sarah's father told Daniel that if he ever hurt his little girl, he would have to answer to him, and Daniel promised he would protect Sarah with his life. The ceremony was held in Daniel's backyard, under a canopy of flowers, with Jaden and Jordan serving as ring bearers in tiny tuxedos. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Jordan raised his hand and everyone gasped. The little boy said very seriously that he objected to waiting any longer because he wanted to call Sarah Mommy right now. The whole crowd erupted in laughter and tears, and the officiant said that was the best objection he had ever heard. When Daniel and Sarah were pronounced husband and wife, the boys ran up and hugged them both, and they stood there as a family of 4 while everyone cheered. Sarah looked around at all the people who loved them and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the lonely waitress who had almost skipped a blind date and could not believe how much her life had changed. She whispered a silent thank you to Alicia for bringing these 3 amazing men into the world and promised to love them with everything she had. The first year of marriage was an adjustment as Sarah learned to navigate being a wife and a mother at the same time. She quit her job at the diner and enrolled in college to finish her teaching degree because Daniel insisted on supporting her dreams. She felt guilty at first about not working. Daniel reminded her that raising the twins and going to school was more than a full-time job. The boys started kindergarten, and Sarah volunteered in their classroom every week. She loved watching them learn and grow and make friends. Jaden was quiet and artistic and loved to draw pictures of their family. Jordan was loud and energetic and wanted to be a scientist when he grew up. They were different in so many ways but identical in their capacity to love. Sarah established routines and traditions that made their house feel like a home. Friday nights were pizza and movie nights. Saturday mornings were pancake breakfasts. Sunday afternoons were family game time. The boys thrived on consistency, and Sarah loved giving them the stable childhood she had never had. Daniel watched his wife transform their house into a home and fell more in love with her every single day. He made sure to tell her constantly how much he appreciated everything she did because he never wanted her to feel taken for granted. 2 years into their marriage, Sarah graduated with her teaching degree and got a job at the boys' elementary school teaching 2nd grade. Daniel threw her a huge graduation party and invited everyone they knew. He gave a speech about how proud he was of his wife and how she had overcome every obstacle in her path. Sarah cried happy tears and thanked everyone for supporting her journey. Her parents were there sober for 2 years now, and they told her how proud they were. Sarah realized that her success had inspired them to get their lives together, and that made everything even more meaningful. At the party, Gloria pulled Sarah aside and told her something that made her heart swell. She said that Alicia had appeared to her in a dream shortly after Sarah and Daniel got engaged. In the dream, Alicia had been smiling and had told Gloria to tell Daniel that she approved of Sarah and that she was grateful someone was loving her boys the way they deserved. Gloria said she had not told anyone because she did not want to seem crazy, but that she felt Sarah needed to hear it. Sarah hugged Gloria tight and said that she felt Alicia's presence sometimes and that she hoped she was making her proud. Gloria said there was no doubt in her mind that Alicia was smiling down on all of them. Life was not always perfect, and there were challenges that tested their family. When the twins were 7, Jordan started having behavioral problems at school. He was getting into fights and talking back to teachers, and Sarah and Daniel were called in for multiple conferences. They took Jordan to a child psychologist who explained that sometimes children process grief in delayed waves. Even though Jordan had never known his birth mother, he was grieving the idea of her, and acting out was his way of expressing anger about his loss. The psychologist worked with Jordan for months, teaching him healthy ways to express his feelings. Sarah spent extra time with him doing art therapy and letting him talk about his emotions without judgment. Slowly, Jordan began to improve, and the angry outbursts became less frequent. Daniel struggled with guilt, feeling like he had somehow failed his son, but Sarah reminded him that parenting was a journey, and that asking for help was a sign of strength, not weakness. The experience brought them even closer as a family, because they learned to communicate better and support each other through difficult times. When the twins turned 8, Sarah and Daniel sat them down for an important conversation. They explained that Sarah was not their biological mother, but that family was about love, not blood. They showed the boys pictures of Alicia and told them stories about how brave she was. They explained that Alicia had given her life to bring them into the world, and that was the greatest act of love possible. Jaden cried and said he wished he could have met her. Sarah held him close and told him that he carried pieces of his mother inside him in his kindness and creativity. Jordan asked if it was okay to love both his mothers, and Daniel told him that love multiplied and never divided. The boys seemed to understand, and the conversation brought a new level of openness to their family. They started celebrating Alicia's birthday every year by releasing balloons with messages to heaven. It became a tradition, honored the past while celebrating their present. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Daniel surprised Sarah with a trip to Paris, just the two of them, while Gloria watched the boys. Sarah had never been out of the country, and she felt like a princess, walking the streets of the most romantic city in the world. On their last night in Paris, Daniel took her to the top of the Eiffel Tower at sunset. He told her that 5 years ago he had been a broken man, just going through the motions, but that she had healed parts of him he did not know were wounded. He said that she had given his sons a mother and given him a partner and best friend. He said that every day with her was a gift, and that he would spend the rest of his life making sure she knew how loved she was. Sarah told him that he had saved her too in ways he did not understand. She said that before she met him, she had felt invisible and unimportant, but that he had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. She said that their love story was proof that broken people could find each other and build something beautiful together. They stood on top of the Eiffel Tower holding each other as the lights of Paris twinkled below, and both of them felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. When the twins turned 10, they asked Daniel and Sarah for a little brother or sister, because all their friends had siblings. Sarah and Daniel had discussed having more children, but had decided they were happy with their family of 4. But seeing the hope in the boys' eyes made them reconsider. After many long conversations, they decided to try for another baby. Sarah got pregnant within 3 months, and the whole family was overjoyed. The twins were incredible big brothers even before the baby arrived, helping Sarah with everything and talking to her belly every night. Daniel was nervous about having another child after losing Alicia, but Sarah's pregnancy was healthy and uncomplicated. On a warm spring morning, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl they named Grace. Alicia Webb. The twins met their little sister in the hospital, and Jaden said she was the most perfect thing he had ever seen. Jordan declared that he would protect her forever and never let anything bad happen to her. Daniel held his daughter with tears streaming down his face and thanked God for giving him a second chance at experiencing this moment. Sarah watched her husband hold their daughter surrounded by their sons and felt a sense of completeness she had never known was possible. Raising a baby while managing 2 energetic 10-year-old boys and teaching full-time was exhausting, but Sarah had never been happier. The twins were incredible helpers and fought over who got to hold Grace or feed her a bottle. Daniel scaled back his hours at work and hired a new CEO to run the day-to-day operations so he could be more present at home. He said that he had missed too much of the twins' early years, working constantly, and he was not going to make the same mistake with Grace. The Family fell into a new rhythm, and their house was filled with laughter and chaos and love. Sarah's parents visited often, and Gloria moved into a guest house on the property, so she could be close to her grandchildren. The family that had started with a missed blind date and two polite little boys had grown into something bigger and more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. On Grace's first birthday, the family gathered in the backyard for a celebration. Sarah looked around at everyone she loved and felt overwhelmed with emotion. Her parents were there, sober and healthy. Gloria was there playing with the grandchildren she adored. The twins were there at 11 years old, growing into amazing young men. Daniel was there grilling burgers and laughing with friends. And baby Grace was there smashing cake into her face with pure joy. Sarah thought about the scared 30-year-old waitress who had almost given up on love and dreams. She thought about the grief-stricken billionaire who had closed his heart after losing his wife. She thought about two little boys who just wanted a mommy. And she thought about how all their broken pieces had come together to create something whole. Sarah had learned that family was not always about blood or perfect circumstances. Family was about showing up and choosing love even when it was hard. Family was about honoring the past while building the future. Family was about second chances and new beginnings. As the party continued, Sarah pulled Daniel aside and told him she had something to say. She told him that 10 years ago she had walked into a diner expecting nothing and had found everything. She said that he and the boys had given her a purpose and a family and a life beyond her wildest dreams. She said that loving them had taught her that she was worthy of love in return. She said that their story was proof that sometimes the best things in life come when you are not looking for them. Daniel kissed his wife and told her that she was the answer to prayers he had been too afraid to say out loud. He said that she had saved him and his sons in ways that could not be measured. He said that every morning he woke up grateful that his babysitter had canceled that night 10 years ago. They stood there holding each other while their children played in the yard, and both of them knew that this was what happiness looked like. It was messy and loud and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. Years passed and the Webb family continued to grow and thrive. Jaden grew up to be an artist who used his talent to help underprivileged children express themselves through art therapy. Jordan became a pediatric doctor dedicating his life to helping sick children the way doctors had helped him. Grace grew up strong and confident with 3 parents who adored her and 2 big brothers who protected her fiercely. Daniel eventually sold his company and dedicated his wealth to charitable causes focusing on single parents and children who had lost parents. Sarah became a principal at an elementary school in an underserved community where she could make the biggest impact. She never forgot where she came from, and she made sure every child who walked through her doors knew they were valued and important. The family made it their mission to help others find hope in difficult circumstances. They established the Alicia Webb Foundation, which provided support for families dealing with loss and grief. They funded scholarships for kids from trailer parks and low-income communities. They opened free coding classes for children who wanted to learn technology but could not afford it. Everything they did was rooted in the belief that everyone deserved this second chance at happiness. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Daniel and Sarah renewed their vows in the same backyard where they had first married. The twins were now grown men standing beside their father as best men. Grace was a beautiful 10-year-old, serving as her mother's maid of honor. Gloria sat in the front row at 80 years old, still strong and vibrant. Sarah's parents were there celebrating 20 years of sobriety and a relationship with their daughter they had rebuilt from scratch. As Sarah and Daniel stood facing each other and recited new vows they had written together, there was not a dry eye in the audience. Sarah promised to continue choosing Daniel every single day for the rest of their lives. Daniel promised to never stop showing Sarah how much she was loved and valued. They promised to keep building a legacy of love that would outlast them both. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause and the twins whistled loudly while Grace jumped up and down clapping. It was a celebration of not just 20 years of marriage, but of a family that had been built on faith and hope and unconditional love. That evening, as the party wound down, Sarah stood on the back porch watching her family. Daniel was teaching Grace how to dance while the twins laughed and took videos on their phones. Gloria sat in her chair smiling at the scene before her. Sarah thought about the scared woman she had been 20 years ago, sitting in that diner waiting for a blind date who was late. She thought about how close she had come to leaving before those two little boys walked through the door and changed her entire life. She thought about how one moment of staying and one moment of grace had led to all of this beauty. Sarah had learned that life's greatest gifts often came wrapped in unexpected packages. That love was not about perfect timing, but about perfect hearts finding each other. That family was not limited by biology, but expanded by choice and commitment. That every person had a story, and every story deserved a chance at a happy ending. As Daniel caught her eye from across the yard and smiled that same smile that had stolen her heart, 20 years ago, Sarah smiled back and whispered a prayer of gratitude. She thanked God for blind dates and traffic jams and canceled babysitters. She thanked God for two little boys who had the courage to ask for a mommy. She thanked God for a man who had shown her what real love looked like. And she thanked God for the journey that had brought them all together and for the beautiful life they had built from broken pieces. Their story was proof that it was never too late for a new beginning and that love could heal even the deepest wounds.